Imagine waking up to a world where the rules you thought mattered don't actually apply. Where being good or kind isn't what puts people in power, but instead their ability to control, deceive, and outthink everyone around them. That's the world Niccolò Machiavelli lived in, and the world he revealed to us through his work. He wasn't a dreamer, he was a realist, maybe the most brutally honest realist who ever lived. His book, The Prince, didn't teach people how to be noble leaders. It taught them how to survive in a ruthless game of power where everyone is out for themselves. And here's the dangerous truth. His lessons are just as relevant today as they were 500 years ago. Machiavelli believed something that many people still don't want to admit. Most people are selfish, and their actions are driven by fear, desire, and survival. If you understand this, you can predict behavior. And if you can predict behavior, you can influence it. That's where the real power lies. He didn't say leaders should be cruel for the sake of cruelty, but he warned that being too soft, too trusting, or too focused on being good would leave you powerless. The smart ones, he argued, appear virtuous on the outside, but remain ruthless and calculating on the inside. They wear a mask of morality, while underneath, every move is carefully designed to maintain control. Think about it for a moment. How many people in power today look generous, honest, or moral in public, but behind closed doors make decisions that are completely self-serving? Machiavelli would say that's not hypocrisy, that's strategy. Because reputation is more valuable than truth. People don't follow reality, they follow perception. And if you can control how people see you, you can control almost everything else. Here's where I want to bring you in. What do you think is more important? Being genuinely good or being seen as good? Comment real if you believe authenticity is stronger, or image if you think appearances matter more. I'll be watching the comments closely. Machiavelli's insights weren't just for kings and princes. They're for anyone living in a world where perception shapes outcomes, politics, business, even social media. The people who rise to the top aren't always the ones who deserve it, but the ones who understand human nature well enough to use it. And that's why learning these lessons might just make you dangerously smart. Machiavelli's most famous and most controversial lesson comes down to a single, unsettling question: is it better to be loved or feared? For centuries, philosophers, teachers, and leaders had argued that love was the ultimate glue that held society together. But Machiavelli shattered that illusion. He claimed that if a ruler has to choose between the two, fear is far more reliable. His reasoning was brutally simple. Love is fragile, built on trust and loyalty that can disappear the moment circumstances change. But fear lasts. Fear keeps people in line even when they disagree, even when they're angry, even when their hearts aren't loyal. Because when people are afraid of consequences, they hesitate before rebelling. This doesn't mean Machiavelli thought love was useless. In fact, he warned that pure fear without some respect would backfire, leading to hatred and eventual downfall. He understood the delicate balance. A smart leader, according to him, should aim to be loved when possible, but never depend on it. Love is a gift, but fear is insurance. That's why his advice was clear. If you can't be both, then it's safer to be feared. Now think about modern life. Look at world leaders, CEOs, or even influencers who dominate online spaces. Do they rise to power because people adore them, or because people respect, fear, and recognize their influence? In business, for example, a company that tries too hard to be liked by everyone usually ends up weak and forgotten. But a company that establishes dominance, sets strict rules, and makes people respect its brand identity stays powerful for decades. The same goes for personal relationships. Sometimes, the person who sets boundaries and shows strength gains more respect than the one who bends over backward trying to be loved. Here's where it gets interesting. Fear doesn't always mean terror or cruelty. It can simply mean authority. A parent, for example, might be loved by their child, but without a healthy sense of fear, the understanding that disobedience has consequences, the child won't listen. A boss might be admired, but without a certain level of seriousness, employees may not take deadlines seriously. Machiavelli understood that human beings respond more consistently to consequences than to kindness. And that hasn't changed, but there's a dark edge to this idea. What happens when leaders push fear too far? Machiavelli warned about that too. He argued that while fear ensures obedience, hatred destroys stability. A leader who becomes hated eventually collapses because hatred drives people to unite against them. The sweet spot is control through fear, without crossing the line into cruelty that sparks rebellion. In modern terms, it's the difference between a strict but respected boss and a tyrant who everyone secretly plots against. Think about history's great leaders. Many of them are remembered as both admired and feared, but the feared part is what secured their authority. Alexander the Great, Napoleon, even modern-day political figures, they were not simply loved. Their power rested on a reputation for strength, ruthlessness, and the ability to enforce consequences. The respect they commanded wasn't just admiration, it was the careful edge of fear that kept people in check. Now let me turn this to you. If you had the choice, would you rather be loved by everyone, knowing that love can vanish the moment people's interests change? Or would you rather be feared just enough that no one dares cross you, even if they don't truly like you? Drop your answer in the comments. Type love if you believe affection holds more power, or fear if you believe authority lasts longer. This question has been debated for over 500 years, and your perspective matters. But here's the secret twist most people miss when they read Machiavelli. He didn't write his ideas to encourage evil. He wasn't saying you should become a monster. What he was really doing was pulling the mask off human behavior. He was showing us that most people in positions of power already use these strategies, whether we like it or not. He was warning ordinary people not to be naive, not to assume that love, kindness, or fairness would protect them. Instead, he wanted readers to see the world clearly, to understand the hidden rules of survival. And when you understand those rules, you're not easily manipulated. Imagine being in a negotiation. One person walks in trying to be liked, offering compromises, smiling too much, and hoping for approval. The other walks in with calm authority, speaks less, demands respect, and makes it clear there will be consequences for being ignored. Who walks out with more? Machiavelli would say the second person, every time. Because respect built on fear, even subtle fear, outlasts temporary affection. That's why his words still matter in today's world of politics, business, and even social media influence. The people at the top are not just the most loved. They're the ones who control perception, set boundaries, and aren't afraid of being feared. And that's what makes them untouchable. So ask yourself again, if you had to choose, would you rather walk through life chasing love that may disappear, or stand firm with respect that comes from strength? Machiavelli knew his answer. Now it's your turn. If there's one lesson from Machiavelli that feels almost tailor-made for today's world, it's his obsession with perception. He argued that a leader's reputation was far more important than their actual character. Reality can be hidden, manipulated, or ignored, but perception sticks. People don't judge you by who you truly are. They judge you by what they see, what they hear, and what they believe. And once that belief takes root, it's nearly impossible to shake. For Machiavelli, control of perception meant control of power. Think about how this plays out around you. In politics, a leader's reputation often overshadows the truth. Scandals might happen, lies may be told, but as long as the public sees a polished image, the leader survives. In business, brands spend billions creating a perception of quality, even when the reality might not match. A luxury brand doesn't always produce better products than its competitors, but because people perceive it as superior, it becomes a symbol of status. That's the Machiavellian truth. It's not the reality of what you do that matters most. It's how you are perceived. Machiavelli went even further by suggesting that a wise leader should focus more energy on managing their image than on perfecting their moral character. Appearing kind, just, and trustworthy is enough, even if, behind the scenes, you make ruthless decisions. People don't have the time or desire to see the full truth. They latch onto appearances. And the clever ones, the dangerously smart ones, use that weakness to their advantage. Look at social media today. Influencers rise not because they're the best at what they do, but because they've mastered the art of looking like they're the best. A person's life might be messy, but as long as their Instagram feed looks perfect, they attract admiration, sponsorships, and status. Politicians are no different. They wear the right suits, give inspiring speeches, and smile for the cameras, all while making decisions in private that don't match their public face. This isn't hypocrisy in the Machiavellian sense. It's strategy. It's survival. But there's a dangerous side to this idea. Once people realize they've been deceived, trust collapses, and rebuilding reputation becomes almost impossible. That's why Machiavelli also warned leaders to be consistent with the image they project. If you appear generous, you must occasionally display generosity. If you project strength, you cannot afford a moment of visible weakness. Slip once, and the perception begins to crack. A small inconsistency can grow into doubt, and doubt is poison. Take the example of a celebrity scandal. One wrong move, one leaked video, one tweet out of character, and suddenly the image they've built for years comes crashing down. That's why image management today is a full-time business. Entire teams exist to craft, maintain, and repair reputations. Machiavelli might smile at this modern reality because he saw it coming centuries ago, and here's where the lesson hits home. You don't need to be a prince or a ruler to understand the importance of perception. Even in everyday life, how people see you affects your opportunities. In school, the student who appears confident often gets chosen as a leader, even if they're not the smartest in the room. In the workplace, the employee who looks organized and dependable gets promoted, even if they occasionally struggle behind the scenes. In relationships, the person who seems kind and trustworthy earns affection more easily, even if their true self is more complicated. It's not fair, but it's real. So let me ask you, do you think reputation is stronger than truth? Drop a yes if you believe appearances matter more, or no if you believe truth always wins. I'm curious to see how many of you lean toward Machiavelli's realism versus idealism. Machiavelli believed that people don't have the patience to search for hidden truths. They're busy, distracted, and easily satisfied with surface-level impressions. That's why perception wins. But he also knew perception wasn't just about fooling people. It was about controlling the narrative. If you don't control your own story, someone else will tell it for you. And once that happens, you lose power. The scary thing is we see this everywhere today. Companies that dominate news cycles, influencers who trend on platforms, politicians who steer conversations. They're not always offering reality, they're controlling perception. They tell their story before anyone else can, shaping what people believe. That's the secret weapon. For anyone watching this, the lesson is simple but uncomfortable. If you want influence, you can't ignore how you're perceived. Work on your skills, your goals, and your values, but also remember, perception is the doorway people look through before they decide to trust you, follow you, or give you power. You might be the most capable person in the room, but if no one perceives you that way, it won't matter. So the question is, are you shaping your perception or letting it shape you? Machiavelli's sharpest insight into human nature was simple, unsettling, and timeless. People are selfish, predictable, and driven mostly by their own interests. He stripped away the comforting illusions that humans are noble or selfless at their core. Instead, he argued that most decisions, whether by peasants in his time or by modern people today, are fueled by fear, desire, and survival. This wasn't meant to insult humanity, but to reveal a truth that anyone seeking power must recognize. If you understand what truly drives people, you can predict their behavior. And if you can predict their behavior, you can control it. Think about your own daily life. Most people don't make decisions because it's the right thing to do. They make decisions because of what they stand to gain or lose. A worker shows up on time not because they love the company, but because they fear losing their job. A student studies hard, not purely for knowledge, but to gain good grades, respect, or future opportunities. Even small choices, what to buy, who to befriend, what to share online, are usually motivated by self-interest, whether that interest is status, money, pleasure, or comfort. Machiavelli believed this selfish core was the most predictable part of humanity. He also pointed out that people are easily influenced when their desires and fears are triggered. Promise someone safety, wealth, or recognition, and they will follow. Threaten their security or status, and they will resist. This pattern repeats endlessly across history. Leaders who understand this truth know how to pull the strings. They don't waste time appealing to high ideals, they appeal to basic instincts. They tell people what they want to hear, offer them what they crave, and warn them of dangers if they disobey. And the crowd responds over and over in ways Machiavelli predicted centuries ago. Take politics as an example. Politicians often frame their speeches around fear. Fear of an enemy, fear of economic collapse, fear of losing traditions. Or they appeal to desire, promises of wealth, jobs, progress, or pride. Rarely do they ask people to make sacrifices for pure morality. Why? Because they know what works. Machiavelli would argue that successful politicians survive by playing directly to selfish instincts, not noble ideals. The same dynamic plays out in business. Advertisers don't sell products by giving you logical reasons. They sell by tapping into your desires. The desire to look attractive, to feel safe, to appear successful, to be envied. They know that people act when emotions are triggered. A luxury car ad doesn't just talk about engines. It shows a powerful image of status and success. That's pure Machiavelli, understanding human behavior well enough to shape it. Even in relationships, this selfish predictability shows up. People might say they value honesty, loyalty, or generosity, but often their actions reveal different priorities. Friendships last as long as they're mutually beneficial. Romantic love, as intense as it feels, can fade if personal needs aren't being met. Machiavelli believed this wasn't a flaw, but a reality. Expecting people to act against their own interests for too long is naive. The smart move is to anticipate the limits of loyalty and plan around them. Now let's flip the perspective. If you know people are selfish and predictable, you can protect yourself from being exploited. How many times have you been disappointed because you expected someone to act out of goodness, only to realize they acted out of self-interest? Machiavelli would say the mistake wasn't in their action, but in your expectation. By lowering illusions and seeing people clearly, you stop being surprised and start being prepared. Here's a question for you. Do you believe most people act out of genuine kindness, or do you think self-interest is behind almost everything? Comment kindness if you believe good intentions are real, or self if you think self-interest rules the world. I'm curious how many of you lean toward Machiavelli's darker realism. The danger in ignoring this truth is that it leaves you vulnerable. If you believe people are always loyal or generous, you will be shocked when betrayal happens. But if you accept that self-interest drives most choices, betrayal stops being shocking. It becomes predictable. You learn to look for incentives, not promises. You start asking, what does this person gain by supporting me? What do they risk if they turn against me? Those are the questions Machiavelli would want you to ask. This doesn't mean you should become cynical and distrust everyone. It means you should see clearly. By acknowledging that people act from self-interest, you can build smarter alliances, create stronger strategies, and avoid being blindsided. It's not about hating humanity, it's about understanding it. So the lesson here is both harsh and empowering. People may say they are guided by morality, loyalty, or faith, but when pressure comes, self-interest usually wins. If you recognize this pattern, you gain an advantage in every area of life, from politics to business to personal relationships. And that's what Machiavelli meant by being dangerously smart, knowing the truth about people, even when it's uncomfortable, and using that truth to navigate a world built on survival and desire. One of Machiavelli's most fascinating lessons is the idea of wearing a mask of morality. He argued that a wise leader should always appear good, honest, and virtuous on the outside, while inside remaining completely free to act ruthlessly when necessary. To him, morality was a tool of perception, not a fixed rule for behavior. He believed people judge leaders not by their hidden actions, but by their public image. So it is far more useful to look moral than to be moral. And behind that mask, a leader can make tough, even brutal choices that would never be accepted if exposed. This might sound cold or manipulative, but Machiavelli wasn't praising dishonesty for its own sake. He was pointing out how the real world works. People admire kindness, generosity, and fairness, but they often fail to notice when those traits are performed rather than genuine. A ruler who seems merciful will be loved, even if behind closed doors they are making ruthless deals. On the other hand, a ruler who shows raw cruelty openly, even if they are effective, will be hated. The lesson is clear: appearances matter more than truth. Show people what they want to see, and you can act more freely in the shadows. Think about how this applies today. Politicians are masters of this Machiavellian mask. They smile for cameras, kiss babies, and deliver speeches about justice and equality. Meanwhile, the real decisions, cutthroat negotiations, power struggles, compromises with questionable allies, happen away from the spotlight. They know that if the public sees the ruthless side, trust would vanish. But as long as they maintain the mask of morality, their power survives. In business, CEOs present themselves as visionary leaders who care about innovation and people. But inside boardrooms, they might be slashing jobs, crushing competitors, or manipulating markets. To the public eye, they are heroes of progress. In reality, they are strategists of survival. Even on a smaller scale, this principle is everywhere. On social media, people curate their lives to appear happy, generous, or authentic, while hiding struggles, flaws, and selfish choices. Friends may present themselves as loyal, but act differently when personal gain is involved. Machiavelli would nod at all of this. He understood that human beings crave the illusion of morality, and the clever ones supply it while keeping their true motives hidden. But there's a risk to this game. If the mask slips, the damage is enormous. When someone is exposed as a fraud, a hypocrite, or a liar, the betrayal cuts deeper than open ruthlessness ever would. That's why Machiavelli emphasized consistency. If you project morality, you must reinforce it often enough to keep the illusion alive. A ruler who pretends to be generous must occasionally give a gift. A leader who claims to care for justice must sometimes enforce it publicly. These small acts feed the mask, convincing people the image is real, even when most decisions remain self-serving. History is full of examples. Some leaders were admired for decades because they mastered the balance between appearing moral and acting strategically. Others fell because they either ignored the importance of appearances or allowed their true selves to be revealed. Reputation, once broken, is nearly impossible to restore. Machiavelli's advice was not to abandon morality altogether, but to treat it as a costume, one you wear convincingly while making sure your real work remains hidden. So how do we apply this lesson personally? In everyday life, people judge us by what we appear to stand for. Colleagues, friends, and even strangers make decisions about us based on our image. If you want influence, you can't simply rely on being good inside. You have to show it outside too. The problem is that people often confuse authenticity with openness. Being authentic doesn't mean revealing everything. It means managing what you reveal so it aligns with what people expect from you. That's the Machiavellian twist. By curating the right mask, you protect your real freedom to act as you wish. Here's a question for you. If you had to choose between actually being good or only appearing good while secretly acting as you needed, which would you choose? Comment real if you'd prefer true goodness, or mask if you think appearances win in the end? This dilemma has no easy answer, but it forces you to think about how power truly works. Machiavelli never believed the world was kind or fair. He believed survival required strategy. And in a world where people crave morality but respond to appearances, the smartest move is to wear the mask convincingly while keeping the freedom to act ruthlessly beneath it. That's what makes someone not just smart, but dangerously smart. Machiavelli's most famous and most controversial idea is the question of whether it is better for a ruler to be loved or feared. On the surface, it sounds simple. Everyone wants to be loved, and being loved feels like the most natural path to loyalty. But Machiavelli warned that love is fragile, easily broken when circumstances change. Fear, on the other hand, is far more reliable. A ruler who is feared holds power more firmly because fear is rooted in people's survival instincts. It is not dependent on moods, gratitude, or admiration. Fear keeps people in line when love fades. This doesn't mean Machiavelli advocated cruelty for its own sake. He never said a ruler should become a monster or treat people with pointless violence. In fact, he believed excessive cruelty would lead to hatred, and hatred is dangerous because it drives rebellion. Fear in his mind had to be carefully balanced. The ideal leader, he argued, is feared enough to command obedience, but not so hated that people want revenge. The sweet spot lies in respect mixed with caution, where people admire a leader's strength but would never dare cross them. Think about how this principle plays out in modern life. A boss who only wants to be loved may avoid hard decisions, bending to every request from employees and losing authority. Eventually, people stop taking them seriously. On the other hand, a boss who rules entirely through fear may create resentment, high turnover, and even sabotage. The most effective leaders manage to balance both, showing enough care to maintain loyalty, but enough authority to maintain respect. Machiavelli would say that if forced to choose between the two, fear is the safer option. History offers countless examples. Leaders who relied too much on love often found themselves betrayed the moment circumstances shifted. Think of rulers who trusted allies blindly, only to be overthrown when loyalty proved false. Machiavelli understood that when people's interests collide with their affections, self-interest almost always wins. Fear, however, overrides those calculations. Even if someone dislikes a leader, they hesitate to act against them if the cost is too high. Fear creates stability where love creates risk. But let's push this further. Machiavelli wasn't just talking about kings and princes. These dynamics play out in everyday relationships. In friendships, in families, even in romantic partnerships, the balance of love and fear influences behavior. Too much dependence on love can lead to exploitation, where one person gives endlessly while the other takes advantage. Too much fear destroys intimacy, creating walls instead of trust. The balance, again, is the key. Respect mixed with affection creates stability. But when one must dominate, Machiavelli's advice remains consistent. Choose fear. Now here's a challenge for you. Imagine you were in a position of leadership, a CEO, a politician, or even just the head of a small group. Would you rather be remembered as someone everyone loved, but who was easily ignored, or as someone people feared, but who always got results? Which matters more to you, being admired or being respected? Drop your answer in the comments. Type love if you believe admiration is stronger, or fear if you believe authority is the real power. This is the exact dilemma Machiavelli wanted us to wrestle with. Another subtle insight here is how fear can coexist with admiration when managed properly. A leader can demonstrate fairness, intelligence, and strength while still being firm enough to keep people cautious. Machiavelli would argue that this is the true art of leadership, not just choosing love or fear, but blending them in such a way that people never question who is in control. If a leader can make followers feel both respect and caution, their position becomes almost unshakable. In today's world, this principle is everywhere. Influencers build love through charisma, but many fail when scandals break because admiration alone cannot protect them. Political leaders often rise through inspiring hope, but only those who balance that with firm control remain in power. Even in personal careers, those who seek only to be liked often stagnate, while those who cultivate respect, even if it makes them less popular, advance further. Machiavelli's lesson is timeless. Love is nice, but fear lasts. So the next time you think about leadership, whether in politics, business, or personal life, ask yourself, are you building your power on affection or on authority? And if one has to be sacrificed, which would you keep? Machiavelli's answer was clear. Love may win hearts, but fear secures thrones. That is the brutal, dangerous wisdom that has echoed for centuries. Machiavelli's final and perhaps most unsettling insight is about control. All his lessons on power, fear, deception, and image point to one ultimate truth. No matter how clever or ruthless we are never fully in control. Fortune, what he called fortuna, always plays a role. It is the unpredictable force of chance, luck, and circumstance that can destroy even the strongest ruler or elevate the weakest. Machiavelli admitted that no matter how carefully you plan, the world will throw challenges beyond your control. A flood, a betrayal, a sudden shift in alliances, a twist of fate, all of these can topple even the most strategic leader. But here's where his genius lies. Instead of simply accepting fate, he believed in preparing for it. He argued that while you cannot stop fortune, you can shape how it affects you. Think of fortune as a river. You cannot stop it from flooding, but you can build walls, redirect its course, and prepare so that when the waters rise, you survive while others are swept away. This idea changes everything. It means that the truly wise leader is not just one who manipulates people or wears masks, but one who anticipates chaos and adapts faster than anyone else. Flexibility, resilience, and readiness are the ultimate weapons against fortune. Machiavelli admired leaders who could pivot when circumstances shifted. Those who clung to one strategy even when the world changed were doomed. He warned that success breeds arrogance, and arrogance blinds you to new dangers. The moment you think you are untouchable, fortune reminds you that you are not. Now think about our world today. Technology shifts overnight, economies crash, leaders fall from grace in an instant because of scandals, tweets, or sudden public backlash. Fortune shows up as unexpected crises, like pandemics or wars, that reshape society. Those who prepared, adapted, and acted boldly survived and even thrived. Those who relied on the same old methods were destroyed. Machiavelli would argue that fortune is not your enemy, but your ultimate test. How you respond to it determines whether you stay in power or vanish into history. But there's another layer to this insight. Fortune doesn't just test leaders. It tests all of us. In our personal lives, we often believe we are in control of our careers, relationships, and choices. But one unexpected event can shake that illusion. A sudden job loss, a betrayal, an accident. These moments remind us that control is fragile. The question becomes, are you preparing for the flood, or are you living as if the river will never rise? Machiavelli's wisdom isn't just about politics. It's a survival guide for life itself. He also connected fortune to courage. He believed fortune favors the bold. People who hesitate, who play it safe, often lose when circumstances shift. Those who take risks, who act decisively even in chaos, are the ones fortune seems to reward. It's not that they control fate. It's that they meet fate with strength instead of weakness. In other words, fortune will always test you, but your courage decides the outcome. This is why Machiavelli admired rulers who dared to take bold actions, even when uncertain. Playing small in a dangerous world is often the greatest danger of all. So here's the ultimate question. Do you believe success comes from skill or from luck? Comment skill if you believe human strategy determines everything, or luck if you think fortune holds the bigger hand. This is not just a thought experiment, it reveals how you see the world. Machiavelli believes skill, preparation, and adaptability could bend fortune in your favor. But only if you stop pretending the world was safe and predictable. And this brings us to the most dangerous wisdom of all. The people who rise to the top are not the ones who simply hope for good fortune, nor the ones who cling to morality, nor even the ones who inspire love. They are the ones who understand the brutal mix of all these forces, who appear moral but act strategically, who balance fear with loyalty, and who prepare endlessly for chaos. These are the people who survive when others collapse. They are the ones who seem almost untouchable, as if destiny itself bends for them. Machiavelli's lessons are not comfortable. They strip away illusions about goodness, fairness, and control. But by doing so, they offer a kind of dangerous clarity. The world will never be fair. People will never be perfect, and fortune will always be unpredictable. But with awareness, courage, and strategy, you can play the game better than most. And maybe, just maybe, that's all the control you will ever need.